Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Welcome into the box seats here on latenightsportsradio.com with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan. Alex B. Smith of sportsmemo.com, axsmithsports.com, and kellyinvegas.com. Alex, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, Bob. A really busy week. We had a great opening week of college football action of the Labor Day weekend, but now we've got college football and we've got week one of the NFL. These games finally count. It's finally, regular season time. So it's super busy, super crazy, but very exciting as always.
The best part of this week was my buddy placing a bunch of money on some parlays, and the parlay started with Tennessee, Appalachian State, and he picked them. And I was warning him, hey, and I believe you put out the warning out there as well on our show last week to not just jump on this immediately. Tennessee only a 7-point victor over Appalachian State, and then you even look at a Stanford. My big picks were the Rutgers game versus Washington. Washington covering that, and then I was wrong on Ohio State Bowling Green. Both of us were right on the Michigan versus Hawaii game. But what was the biggest thing that surprised you as far as this week goes in betting?
It was interesting. The big games, the marquee games of the week, certainly with the Sunday's Notre Dame Texas game, I was stunned at how that game goes. But the biggest shock had to be Monday night with Ole Miss and Florida State. I'm watching this game, I had no play on either one of those two games, but watching how the action kept going back and it was completely one-sided with Ole Miss earlier than Florida State just roaring back late. It was an exciting game to watch, but I'm so glad I didn't, because I was actually going to jump in live with that. I'm thinking, okay, Ole Miss is just going to completely roll through, wire to wire in this game, and Florida State definitely a team that you do not want to fade against in the second half of games when they're trailing, because they find a way to come back and win more often than not under Jimbo Fisher. So didn't have the best of week. I had started off with Florida International looking good early in that game, but then a couple of pick sixes by Indiana. They just ended up rolling and winning that game big. Got very lucky on Saturday. I gave this one out, Penn State and Kent State over. It goes over by literally 1 point with a late touchdown. That game, there should have been way more points scored in that game, but there was a lot of sloppy penalties by Penn State, and I think that might come back to bite them in the butt down the road. If they keep playing sloppy like that, we might see Penn State end up losing more games than they should actually be winning. So some interesting things to note on. But there's some pretty good spots this week in college. Not as great of matchups, viewer-wise. These aren't not a whole lot of top 10 matchups like we had last week, but definitely it's going to be some interesting games to watch this week.
I probably had the poopiest pick of the week, where it was Alabama USC. I thought USC probably could have challenged in this one, at least kept it close. And maybe it wasn't even me, the poopiest pick. It was just everybody. Like, this was just a rout. Does it make you think any more of Alabama or any less of USC, or what should we think of this game?
Yeah, well, we talked about it. Nick Saban, when he has time to game plan, his teams are just outright dangerous, and he proved that once again with this absolute destruction of Southern Cal in the neutral site game. I think I want to say it's more a testament to how good Alabama is. Everybody's saying, okay, you could always expect a letdown from a team that just came off of a national championship. At least the national championship game. Case in point, look at how Clemson kind of struggled against Auburn, just barely edging out the win there. So this could have gone either way going into this game. You wouldn't be shocked if Alabama had won this game 34-27, but you wouldn't have been shocked if there was a huge blowout. It's like I said, it's split. It's split that I thought more of how good Alabama is, but Southern Cal really did look bad, and they just could not hold up in the second half at all.
For Alabama to put up 3 double-digit scoring quarters, and that's including a scoreless first quarter. Like, I remember, I started watching halfway through the second quarter, and that was following a look at ESPN.com, USC controlling the game against Alabama, and they were up 3-0. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I should take a look at placing some bets in this one. And then the second quarter starts rolling along. Alabama starts looking good. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to stay away from this altogether as far as live betting goes, and that's the thing I like to do. And this just became a romp, and it was just terrible. And I just, it's not. I don't think it says anything about Clay Helton as far as a coach, but this was just an absolute romp from once halfway through the second quarter started. It was just a disaster for USC.
Yeah. Well, and then it's able to battle the trenches, and I was talking about this with a few people over before that game. Alabama and Southern Cal, offensive line, defensive line. Alabama's just got bigger bodies, and more talent in the trenches than Southern Cal. Southern Cal is a bit undersized, even for a Pac-12 school on the line, and it really showed in that second half the way that Alabama was just able to run all over the field in that game. But they moved the ball well in the air as well, but they had the run game down pat, and that was thanks to just the mismatch on the line.
Couple things. One, Kansas won against Rhode Island.
First win in 665 days.
Yes, I am halfway. I need one more win to win my bet as far as they go. They beat Rhode Island. I need either an Iowa State or some other garbage team for them to beat. I know it's a lot to ask, but that's an important thing. TCU, though, giving up 41 points to South Dakota State. I know this is a good FCS school, but TCU giving up 41 points to South Dakota State. What does that say to you about TCU? I know they got Kenny Trill with them. What does it say to you?
Well, it goes to show you that teams can reload instead of rebuild, but it's hard to put out a high quality, high level product year after year. And I'm not saying that TCU is still going to be a decent team, but when you have to replace so many starters, and the first game, that's what the first game's all about. That's why you see a lot of big schools get these cupcake matchups against these 1AA schools to, get their own things worked out. So you can't read too much into it. And it's interesting that you talk about those two games, next to each other, because South Dakota State actually beat Kansas last year at the beginning of the year as a play that I had on the Jackrabbits. So, like I said, they are a decent team as far as FCS schools go. But yeah, it's a little concerning looking at TCU giving up a ton of points like that. That means, will they have the offense to match like they have in previous years when they start getting in the shootouts with Baylor, Texas Tech, and schools alike once conference play starts? It's interesting. They're a 7.5-point favorite at home against Arkansas. I don't know if I would be too quick to jump on, laying a touchdown against the Arkansas team that likes to really kind of slow things down a bit. So I think we'll get a better feel, a better test of how the Horned Frogs are going to do this year based on this game coming up this weekend.
As far as anything went, well, the UCLA game, we kind of vaguely discussed it with them and Texas A&M. What caught your eye there? And was there anything that caught your eye as far as MAC Big Ten matchups?
Well, the UCLA A&M game, it's funny because I watched that game late. And unfortunately, I was one of the first people to pick up on seeing when the kid for A&M got the interception and it looked like he dislocated his knee and popped his knee back in.
That was one of the best things I've ever seen.
It was so weird because it was such a split second thing, and I watched it and I'm like, wait a minute, did I just And I'm thinking, no, maybe he was just stretching his leg and had a cramp. Because I mean, we saw a lot of guys go down with leg cramps throughout the weekend, as as customary in the beginning of the year. But then it pops up all over Twitter, and I'm like, no, I did see that correctly. It looked like he pretty much just hyperextended his knee to get it back in place. And it was a great interception. Crazy game. UCLA just blew a ton of opportunities. And it was interesting. We heard Josh Rosen talk so much about how, I don't think Kyle Field's going to be that loud, and obviously the crowd had just he woke up the sleeping giant. Certainly with that crowd down there in College Station gets very loud. So it was a good matchup. It was a big win for A&M. As far as the Big Ten and MAC matchups go, like I said, a lot of sloppy penalties in the Kent State Penn State game. The Nittany Lions should have had at least 3 more touchdowns on the board by when everything was said and done, and penalties took 2 of them completely away, and then they had to settle for a field goal on the third drive. So.
Well, what as far as you finish. Continue with that. I'm sorry.
Well, what I was gonna say is that that's something that another thing that you see early in the year when you have teams. Granted, this is a veteran offense, especially on the offense. They got 5 offensive linemen, and I think they have the most offensive line starts of anyone in the Big Ten, and I think they're like within the top 10 of offensive line total offensive line starts in all of the Power 5 conferences. So it's a little concerning to see a veteran group with a lot of offsides calls, a lot of false start calls. But once again, early in the year, things that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt, because this is basically for everyone other than schools playing against top 10 opponents. These are basically their preseason games. These are the times to work out things that they couldn't work out in just simple practices. So that's why it's so, I always stress about not jumping into a whole lot of games early in the year, because teams have a lot of things to work on. We know who has the talent and who doesn't, right out of the gate, but we have to see how things are going to work out, how schemes are going to be planned, and how teams are going to be able to manage new situations.
Okay, Texas. Before we get into the MAC, really quick, Texas A&M, is this a team to jump on a little bit early on? Because they're probably not going to be a team that's going to be the greatest in the world as far as overall wins and losses, but you got Prairie View this week.
Yeah.
Next week you got at Auburn, who just lost to I wouldn't call it a crushing loss to Clemson, but they played above their abilities against Clemson. Then you got Arkansas, who's not very good at home, and then you got a bad South Carolina team on the road. Is this a team that you might want to jump on as far as betting-wise the next few weeks, or should we stay away from, not overly exaggerate ourselves with this UCLA win?
Well, no, I mean, you bring up a good point. You look at the schedule, like you said, Prairie View A&M, that's going to be a blowout. They'll name their score in that game. But then, like you said, starting conference play on the road at Auburn. Going to be a tough spot. And I'm not quite sure where that game is probably going to end up being lined. I have to look at go back and look at some of the
I would guess
early
a 3.
game of the
I
year
would
spot.
guess a 3 spot.
Yeah, I would say that too. Probably Auburn laying 2.5 or 3. So pretty much even. You just give them the home field ranking of 3. But and then you look at the game after that. You said that Arkansas game actually is a neutral site game. They'll be played at Jerry's World in Arlington. So Arkansas always travels pretty well. So that'll be a split crowd in that one. But Arkansas, like I said, big team, not really great. Auburn didn't look, like I said, spectacular at all against Clemson. It'll be a tough game. We might be able to find some value early, but if they are able to, go on and head into the bye week, their bye week's October 15th. So if they go into their bye week still undefeated, if they can pull off some wins against Auburn, Arkansas, like I said, South Carolina's not that good of a team this year, definitely in rebuild mode, and then they get Tennessee at home. then we might see where they might become overvalued, and we can bet against them in that second leg where they'll be at Alabama, New Mexico State, which they'll be laying a ton of points there, at Mississippi State, Ole Miss at home, and then Texas San Antonio late before LSU. So it'll be interesting. We might get some value on them now, but that value could change if they keep winning, and we might have to start fading them just as far as value goes in the second leg of their season.
Who is the team? Like, I'm looking at Houston. Is there a reason to think that we can't bet them to either money line or win with the points in their games from Oklahoma until Louisville?
I mean, I was stunned at how they basically dominated, in the game, their opening game against Oklahoma. I really thought Oklahoma was going to, I knew it would be a close game early, but I thought Oklahoma would be the team to kind of pull away. That the kick six that Houston returned, it was pretty much the dagger. That was all the momentum, all the air was taken out of Oklahoma sails at that point. Houston dominant on the turnover battle again. They're a team that likes to claw and fight for the ball, and they're still running that same kind of a system. So you look at them now. They've got a cupcake game this week against Lamar. That'll be an easy win. It was interesting because I had this game circled early. Was a short week. They're traveling to Cincinnati, conference game. Cincinnati, lost a close battle in that spot last year. They're at home. Nippert Stadium's a really hard place to play on a Thursday night. That's a loud crowd. We've seen them pull off some big wins on Thursday nights over the years at home. And so that's the game I thought that Houston might get caught up in. But now, looking at how good and how strong this Houston team is, they're still playing the same style and they have the same quality of talent that they did last year. Yeah, it's hard to say that they may, as a lot of people predicted, end up running the table and going into that November 17th game, that Thursday night game at home, mind you, with Louisville. Both of those teams might actually be undefeated. Potentially going into that matchup. You look at Louisville's schedule. They're Friday night. They're playing at Syracuse, and then they got a big game against Florida State. Granted, we saw how good Florida State could be late, but Louisville's not a team that you can let slip away. Their quarterback Jackson's really talented, and if Florida State goes down like they did in the first half of Ole Miss against Louisville, they may not have a chance to make a big comeback. And that's going to be an early start, mind you. So I wouldn't be shocked if we see Louisville possibly, have maybe one loss. They also do have to play at Clemson, so that'd be a tough game as well. But the Houston-Louisville game, that at the end of the year, that's definitely going to be a big game and determine possibly the fate of outside Power 5 team making it into potentially college football playoff.
The Louisville-Syracuse this Friday, kind of a throwback to when we used to get good late-night Friday games on ESPN with Big East, with Louisville versus West Virginia, or Louisville versus Pitt, Louisville versus Connecticut, whoever it may be. Those were fun games in the Big East. Now, Syracuse usually wasn't involved in those because of crap. But this week in college football, what caught your eye as far as spreads, point totals? What was the thing that caught your eye this week, or the few things that caught your eye?
Well, there were a couple of lines that popped up early and moved. There's one game. Well, I can't talk about it too much because that's a best bet that I have in my website. But there's as far as games that I'm looking at that I'm on the cusp of possibly playing. Looking at the line with Northern Illinois, Southern Florida. That was a weird game with Northern and Wyoming last week, starting at midnight, and because of the lightning delays out in Laramie, game didn't end until 3:30 Central. The game went into 3 overtimes. Wyoming ended up getting the win. Northern Illinois got to fly. This is one of their longest travel trips in their program's history. They're flying from the high altitude, highest elevation in Laramie, Wyoming, all the way down to below sea level in Tampa to battle South Florida. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. It will be a night game, so that it will take a little bit of it away. But looking at that spread, we saw a lot of money come in on South Florida, opened at 11 and moved all the way up to 15. And I'm hoping it'll be more money because both these teams like to play decent defense. We've seen Northern Illinois; they can kind of match any style if they can go up tempo when they need to. But the meat and potatoes of this team is running the ball, playing, between the tackles. And that's the same can be said with South Florida. They've got a really dominant defense. So I'm hoping that if we see this line creep up maybe 16 and a half, I might come back and take the points with Northern Illinois. So that's one of the games that kind of caught me right away.
Yeah, a couple of the things that caught me were, Notre Dame coming off of a loss. Yeah, even if it was to a bad loss, I feel like that was a bad loss to Texas. Like Texas, yeah, people were saying, "Oh, this is a dark horse to make the college football playoff," and Notre Dame has 5 guys either suspended or kicked off the team. 30 points against Nevada or 28 and a half in some of these spots. I feel like that's a lot. Like, even when Notre Dame plays a bad Mountain West or a non-Power 5 school at home, I feel like 28 and a half is a lot to ask for Notre Dame, even when they're good. Does that seem like a little high, even coming off of a loss for Notre Dame?
It is a bit high, and it makes sense because, like you said, they're coming off of a loss, so they're gonna, and a crushing loss at that. So they're going to be fired up. It's their first home game, so we know the crowd's gonna be really amped. But Nevada Reno is not that good of a squad.
No.
It's a awkward travel spot for them. Granted, they've traveled a lot over the last couple of years. Their non-conference games have kind of been scattered all over the country, but I could see where Notre Dame. This is one of those games kind of where Nevada, the Wolfpack have a chance to come back in the second half, maybe get that backdoor cover with 4 touchdowns. But I think Notre Dame first half might be probably the way to go. I see Notre Dame dominating this game early. Reno's not going to be a team to hang around with them, but there'll be a team to kind of maybe come back as Notre Dame, tends to wind things down a bit.
As far as, Oregon, Virginia. Oregon is going into a big spot against Nebraska next week. Oregon's at home versus Virginia. What would you, 24, it opened at 20 and a half. Now it's at 24 and a half. What would you say as far as this spot goes? Or what would you say as far as a team going into a bigger game that's playing a weaker Power 5 team?
Well, the thing you look at, like I said early in the year, when you look at these big spreads in any kind of matchup, you have to ask the question. You don't expect these teams to win, but can they hang around for a full 60 minutes? And there's a lot of spots like that. And
just lost to Richmond, and that probably does not bode well.
And Richmond, Grant, and that's that is a in-state game. Richmond's not, they're not exactly a complete doormat, obviously. But Virginia, I don't know, and I saw that score, and I didn't see any of the notes or quotes or anything looking into that game. But it'll be interesting if their defense is that bad. Oregon's obviously gonna exploit that, and just the travel spot alone is a bit rough for them. So it's a game where 24 and a half points. I don't know if I would lay that with Oregon exactly. I'd probably look more toward this total, which we've seen kind of get bought up from open at 68. It's around 70 and a half. I definitely see Oregon, putting up at least 45, 50 points in this game. And if, like I said, if their defense is really that rough, then this could turn into an ugly battle. I don't see Virginia hanging around for 60 minutes, but I'm more comfortable playing the total in this spot because if Virginia does score early, or if Oregon just kind of, lets down late, that 24 and a half could just be enough where we see something crazy happen and it might fall a bit short.
All right. Well, before we get back into college football, we are into NFL Week 1. What caught your eye as far as NFL Week 1 lines, point totals? What caught your eye this week?
Well, I mean, we've seen these numbers up now for seemingly months, but now we've got the true settled in openers. Um, we saw what the openers were, like I said, in June, but now you look at, obviously, the spreads had to change for Minnesota, Tennessee, the Giants in Dallas, the quarterback, Carolina, even Carolina and Denver. We saw Denver now as a 3-point dog for the longest. And Carolina still taking some money for that game tomorrow night as well. So the things that kind of popped out at me were the fact that Minnesota now, we saw where, all right, Bridgewater is basically worth 3 points. However, they're saying the markets are indicating that Bridgewater is about as equal as Sam Bradford and maybe a half a point lower with Shaun Hill. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think we're not going to hear who's going to start for this game until right around kickoff. So Mike Zimmer's kind of playing his hand, kind of holding his cards close. And I think there might be some value on Tennessee now. If you believe that Bradford's going to be the starter, you're not going to get a better price than +2.5. However, if you feel that Shaun Hill is going to be the starter, then plenty of value now, because that line might come back down toward Pick'em. Might even see Tennessee close as maybe a 1-point favorite. Shaun Hill is not as good as Sam Bradford. That he's not even close. He's an older guy. He's a game manager at best. Tennessee's looking pretty good. They've got some things to work out, especially on the run defense, which is going to be tested because Adrian Peterson, we know he's going to get a lot of carries regardless of who's taking the snaps on the center. And that total is interesting as well, 41. Low total, which makes sense because these two teams aren't super proficient offensively. Even with Bridgewater, if Bridgewater was starting this game, I think this total wouldn't be any higher than 43. So I got to see a lot of ball on the ground, a lot of running between the tackles. This is a game that I definitely will be watching and keeping an eye on, because I'm interested to see how Minnesota does with a huge game next week. At the new stadium against the Packers. That's a big game on deck. So they can't really look ahead because this is week 1, but there's going to be a bit of potential to look ahead because of how big of next week's games.
Are there any lines? One thing that did catch my eye was the LA Rams at San Francisco. Rams in some spots 2.5, 2-point favorites. Is that the Rams are back in LA, trying to tempt LA fans, and we should bet San Fran? Or is there some other, other tempting bets out there in that realm? I feel like that's the most tempting, the one that's trying to tempt people the most. Is there another one out there that you feel like might be the most tempting?
It's funny because I'm one of the contestants in the World Series of Handicapping, which is a contest anyone can join online at worldseriesofhandicapping.com. I just submitted my 7 plays about a couple hours ago, and it's a hard contest because it's 7 NFL games, sides and totals, and there wasn't a whole lot of super intriguing matchups on my personal card. I only have 3 plays personally right now in the NFL for Sunday, but some of the lines that I were kind of questioning, and I was able to catch some value because of it's a contest. Looking at the Green Bay Jacksonville game, open 4.5, and it's weird because I'm seeing offshore. I'm still seeing 4.5s, 5s, couple of books 5.5, 6s in Vegas and in Nevada. So obviously you're going to see more money come in on Green Bay, especially closer to kickoff. So I do think there's value in this line, but at the same time, this is a Jacksonville team that really wants to hit the ground running. They've got a improved defense. And the weather conditions aren't going to be super favorable from what I'm hearing. I know there's going to be it's been a ton of rain still in the Florida area, early start. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in this game. I just can't trust Jacksonville at all against the spread. Until I actually see for myself week after week that Jacksonville is capable of winning ball games and staying close against teams. I'd have to look at Green Bay now with that. If you can find a 4.5 or a 5, I think there's great value in it now because that would definitely be over the through the key number of 7 by kickoff on Sunday.
Two lines that I question. Well, actually, the Giants Cowboys, the pick 'em 1 point in some spots. I get because the Giants looked awful in the preseason and Dallas had a rookie quarterback and Dak Prescott that looked phenomenal, and now he's going to be starting because I think it's to tempt Cowboys fans. The other one is the Colts favored by 3.5, 4 points over Detroit at home. Indianapolis's offensive line looked absolutely atrocious this preseason. What do you make of these two matchups, and is there anything or should we just stay away from these altogether?
Well, the Dallas Giants game that did intrigue me, and it's a game that I'm still on the fence about. I think Dallas wins that game. I think Dallas, even with Dak Prescott, I like what I saw from him, and I know a lot of people are questionable about him because of the fact that, okay, well, it was preseason, he wasn't playing against starters. All right, well, then he comes in and plays against Seattle's first team and still looks pretty solid. Didn't get the win there, but he did well. He managed the game well, and everybody's saying, well, okay, but he is not going to see the simplified defensive packages that he saw in August. He's going to be seeing a lot of blitzes. Spagnuolo's got a ton of tricks up his sleeve as far as a D coordinator. The Giants are going to be really coming after him pretty hard. On the flip side of that, and we're seeing this total drop down. Opened at 49 early in the summer. 47 was, I think, around the kind of the modern opener, if you will. Now we're seeing it at 46. Coming down to 45.5. I think if we keep seeing this total coming down a little bit more, might be tempted to play the over in this game because a lot of people are selling the Giants' offense short. They looked terrible in the preseason, but they didn't have Eli Manning for 2 of those games. Victor Cruz wasn't there at all. Odell Beckham was sitting down. With their full complement of offensive artillery, and with Dallas, the way that they did look with Prescott, they're going to have Dez Bryant, they're going to have Ezekiel Elliott. I think this still will end up being a back-and-forth game. These two teams hate each other. It's a huge division rivalry. And so I think we might be able to catch some value with that total, quite possibly, if it keeps coming down closer to that kickoff.
Okay. Well, let's get into our best bets for the week. And I'll go with my good bet for the week. Good bet. I'm going to say Miami. For all the stuff people talked about Miami going into this season with their first 2 games being Seattle, New England, I'm going to say Miami covers the 10.5 point spread at Seattle. I know Seattle's a tough place to play. I know people don't like Ryan Tannehill, blah, blah, blah. But I think Miami ends up covering the spread. 10 points is a lot to cover in the NFL. Miami covers it on the road, and I'm calling that one as my good bet. What is your good bet for the week?
My good bet, I'm looking at the College Board, and it's a game, the in-state rivalry game. You got Ball State and Indiana. Ball State has actually found a way to beat Indiana several times over the last 10, 15 years. These two teams play about every other. I think they played every year now since 2010, if I'm not mistaken. And Indiana's got a great offense, super fast, up tempo. But we saw how good their defense was in that game against Florida International. Like I said, they got 4 interceptions. They forced a pair of fumbles. Two of those interceptions were returned back for touchdowns. That's what gave them the win. Looking at this total, we've seen it drop from 64.5 down to 61. Ball State, not really great at anything. They're average. But I think Indiana is going to, obviously, Indiana brings the best out of them, and we know how up-tempo Indiana can run their offense. I think 61, I think there's a little bit of value there. I think that game goes over the total.
My better bet for this week is I'm going to go, I was torn between a couple, but I'm going to go Alabama to cover a 28.5-point spread over Western Kentucky. This is a spot, I like, Alabama just came off a huge win. Western Kentucky, in their second year of a new coach without Bobby Petrino, I feel Alabama at home, first game at home is just going to be an obliteration. Western Kentucky is going to get destroyed. 28.5 just doesn't seem enough. Even 29, 30 in some spots doesn't seem enough. I'm taking Bama to cover in all spots, at least a 30-point win. Alex, what is your better bet for this week?
My better bet, it's going to be a late-night contest on Saturday. Texas Tech going to Tempe to play Arizona State.
Ooh,
this will be a fun game to watch. Make a note of it if you're at the bar, or you're at home, or this is going to be a good late night battle. Two up tempo, high octane offenses, teams that don't really have the best defenses in the world. We've seen the total come down. It opened at 80, seen it come down a tick down to 79.5, 79. It might come down a little bit even more, because you think 80 points that's a lot of points. 40 points between the two clubs. These two teams are going to get up and down the field a lot, and within 60 minutes, if not longer. So I'm definitely looking at this game going over the total, but I'm going to wait a little bit. I'm hoping might be able to catch this down to 78.5, 78. It's splitting hairs, but I think we could see a little bit more of a movement in our favor before firing away on that over.
Mm-hmm. Best bet for me, I was torn between two. One is a rivalry game between Iowa State and Iowa, which is a 15-point spread, and Wyoming versus Nebraska, which, with Wyoming coming to Nebraska and Craig Bohl, who has been way more successful as a head coach in college football than Nebraska has been as a program since he left Nebraska or was fired from Nebraska, is now coming back to Nebraska as Wyoming's head coach. I know the spread is 24.5. Nebraska blew out Fresno State. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Wyoming's going to shed a tear, have a chance against Nebraska. I'm going to stay away from this one now after it's gone up a tick. I'm going to go Iowa and Iowa State as my best bet. I'm going to say Iowa State covers a 15-point spread against Iowa. I think yes, Iowa's at home and they're good and whatnot. This always seems to be a close game. It's a crappy game, and it's a game you don't want to watch. And usually, a game that you don't want to watch is not a 15-point plus win. So I'm going to say Iowa State covers that, as bad as Iowa State is. I'm going to take Iowa State to cover a 15-point spread. Alex, what is your best bet this week?
My best bet. What's interesting, a quick note with that Nebraska-Wyoming game. He said Wyoming's going to be motivated. He said Craig Bohl, having history down there, definitely going to be motivated. But that's another tough spot. I mentioned Wyoming and the NIU game. That game ending, at 3 a.m. on Sunday. Tough battle back and forth, in triple overtime. However, Mike Riley is clearly just not one of these coaches who cares about blowing teams out. He's now 4-11 as a regular season favorite. So, and Nebraska 2-7 their last 9 as home favorites. Wyoming has covered 6 of their last road openers. So, I lean with Wyoming in that spot, but that's not my best bet. My best bet is Saturday night, North Carolina traveling down to Champaign to battle Illinois. I was stunned to see this line open at 10, and it is actually now dropped to 9. And I actually see an 8.5 at one book. Everyone's, I guess, drinking the orange Kool-Aid with Lovie Smith already down there after the big win over Murray State. Yes, that was a blowout, but Murray State is not even close to a even top tier 1AA program. North Carolina had a series of really bad calls take their momentum away in that game against Georgia. They should have won that game. They were up 10, and 2 phantom pass interference calls set off. And there was the coaching staff got a unsportsmanlike conduct right all in a row. Georgia ends up running away and getting that win. So North Carolina is going to come in pissed off and angry. They're the better team by far. I almost made this game my on my personal card a 2-unit best bet, but it's just a 1-unit play. Laying the points with North Carolina, you can get some good value now at 9. If you can catch it at 8.5, go for it. But I think the Tar Heels win this one big, and Illinois just not even remotely in the same class. We're going to see this one end pretty quickly.
I like that pick. And the one thing I don't like is that it's moving up a little bit. But for it to open at 7 seems ridiculous as far as Lovie Smith winning a game against Murray State. Like, it should not have even been that close for week 2.
No.
Like, it's just ridiculous. But before we get out of here, Alex, do you want to tell everybody where we can find you on Twitter, the internets, all that good stuff?
Yes, absolutely. Follow me on Twitter at AXSmithSports. You can get my season packages at axsmithsports.com. Hockey's about to start really soon, and I'm actually getting my different guides and workbooks and stuff ready for hockey. I'll have my season point total report up pretty soon. Once I got to actually talk to a couple of bookmakers and see when they're posting their numbers for the NHL season win totals. But all that will be up for sale at axsmithsports.com. Individual plays I've got up. I got a 2-unit best bet up now at sportsmemo.com. You can pick that up. That's a game that a line that I really love. We didn't get to talk about it, but you can read all about it if you buy the play right now at sportsmemo.com. And Friday, 3:30 p.m. Central, I'll be on 93.7 The Ticket again down there in Lincoln. We'll be talking about the Husker Wyoming game, talking about some of the other big games in college football. So check me out on the Brett Kane with Box show, 93.7 The Ticket on Friday at 3:30 Central Time. Bob, what do you got going on this week?
This week, as far as Johnny Bobo, I'm not sure what's going on there. This weekend with the Bob Sullivan Show, I believe I'm going to be having a full slate. I'm going to have Tommy and Nick Ollitz talking about the Tyler Ollitz Memorial Softball Tournament. Their brother died 2 years ago in a car accident, so I'm going to be having them on to talk about their brother and their experience in the slow pitch softball tournament. And then I'm also planning on having Brian Keating of KOCO to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners loss to Houston Cougars and maybe whatever happens with Oklahoma this weekend. Talk some more Big 12 and then a couple other guests that are on to be named later. That is my plan as far as the Bob Sullivan Show goes. But, yeah, as far as everything else goes, I think that does it. Alex, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I just want to wish everybody a good weekend and enjoy the games. We got, NFL tomorrow night, Thursday. We got 2 games in college Friday, full slate of college action Saturday leading into Sunday, and 2 games on Monday night. So I wish everybody a safe and happy weekend, a profitable weekend, and we'll be back next week. We'll be back next week on Tuesday, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Tuesday.
That is correct.
We'll be back on. So yeah, it was nice being on live again. So hope everybody has a good week.
Exactly. Well, we will see you next week on Tuesday here on the Box Seats with Alex B. Smith and Bob Sullivan here on LateNightSportsRadio.com. Good night and have a good week.